Congressman and House Democratic Caucus Chairman Hakeem Jeffries. He's also a member of the Judiciary and Budget Committees. Mr. Chairman, you know I take pride coming from Brooklyn calling you that. Let me ask you to respond to what Senator Graham proposed. Open it up for 3 weeks, and then if that does not come or lead to a solution at the border, use the emergency powers that you have.
Well, the first part of what Senator Graham said is something that House Democrats have already proposed to do. We believe that we should reopen the government immediately, including passing bipartisan appropriations bills with respect to all of the other departments that have been shut down, that have nothing to do with this discussion around border security, which relates only to the Department of Homeland Security. So, for instance, reopen the IRS, the Department of Treasury, so that everyday Americans can get access to their tax refunds that they rely upon to make it through the year, and all of the other departments, and perhaps do a short-term continuing resolution that would reopen the Department of Homeland Security for a few weeks so we can have a mature discussion about how to resolve our differences around the border.
Now, with the president in his meeting with both Speaker Pelosi and Minority Leader of the Senate, Schumer, he seemed inflexible. He continues to tweet and make statements that continues to show that inflexibility. Do you think the American people understand how severe this is to those 800,000 plus, because we're talking about contractors and subcontractors and their employees that are not in this 800,000? I mean, this is really, really a problem for people to go day to day now.
Absolutely. And we're going to have to continue to do a good job of communicating with the American people what exactly has transpired here. Donald Trump threatened to shut down the government in December. He then followed through on that threat, has shut down the government simply to try to extract billions of dollars for a medieval border wall that would do nothing to improve border security down in the southwestern part of our country. We, as Democrats, are willing to put forth money for a 21st century solution to improving our border security by doing things like enhanced technology, satellites, drones, increased scanners in order to detect the drugs that actually come through the legal ports of entry, which is where the overwhelming majority of drugs come into the United States of America, notwithstanding.
The legal ports.
That is exactly correct.
And through air travel.
Through legal ports of entry and through air travel. Donald Trump should understand that. His Secretary of Homeland Security should understand that. But they instead try to project falsehoods to try to gin up the xenophobic nature that seems to appeal to many in his base.
And Congressman, you represent a district in Brooklyn where I'm from, and there are immigrants all through your district, always has been since you were a child and before that when I was a child. They're talking about this like this is a Mexican policy. We need immigration policy that goes across the board. Why are we just talking about one border? There's two borders. They build bridges to Canada so you can go gamble. I mean, we've got to have a policy that would be for all immigrants, not just Mexicans. Otherwise, that's just basically racist.
That's correct. And we have two borders. And as you pointed out, along our northern border in Canada, there are more terrorists who have been apprehended on the Canadian border than on the Mexican border, and yet you never hear anything about that. So yes, we have a broken immigration system. Yes, we need comprehensive immigration reform. Yes, we should fix it in a bipartisan way, Democrats and Republicans working together, but we can't have a mature discussion about these issues in the middle of a reckless Trump shutdown where he's holding 800,000 plus workers and the American people hostage at the same time.
Now, you're on the Judiciary Committee in the House, and I certainly have known you when you were a lawyer, even before you went to the State Assembly. You've worked with us in many civil rights cases.
And as a member of NAN.
And as a member of National Action Network. Thank you for always bringing that up. The question I have is, as a member of the Judiciary Committee, how do you respond to these reports of the president? There was an inquiry the FBI started that there was concern that he was acting on behalf of Russia against American interest. I mean, How do you respond to that as one on the Judiciary Committee and one that's a lawyer?
Well, the possibility that there is a Russian asset not only in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, but sitting in the Oval Office as the President of the United States should be deeply frightening to all Americans, regardless of whether you're a Democrat, an independent, or a Republican. But we're going to continue to make sure that the Mueller investigation is allowed to proceed, run its course, investigate the facts, come to a logical conclusion, present that information to the American people, and then we'll see what happens in terms of what the consequences should be thereafter.
Now, you've always been one that said, let's be deliberate, let's not rush to judgment either way, even if it was unpopular in your base. But once there was some conclusion, you wanted to see justice done. I can say that I've known that about you since you were a youngster. What do you and other members of Congress want to hear from people like Michael Cohen and others that are now being subpoenaed? What is it, good or bad, that you're looking for that would give you the key to whether or not we should proceed with impeachment or more?
Well, I think what we've seen over the last 2 years was that the Republicans in the House conducted themselves like the cover-up caucus, like a wholly owned subsidiary of the Trump administration, as opposed to a separate and co-equal branch of government. As an Article I independent branch in the House, we have an obligation to serve as a check and balance on an out-of-control executive. And so by putting forth testimony, as Elijah Cummings, the chairman, will do, with respect to Michael Cohen, he will just allow the facts to be presented to the American people so they will have an understanding of the individual who's sitting in the White House in the highest office in the land.
Now, 2020, we're already hearing people announcing Julian Castro, others have announced, others are getting ready to announce. Are you seeing anybody that attracts your attention, let me put it that way, and what type of candidate do you think the Democrats must come up with for next year?
Well, I think a dynamic, fresh-faced candidate that doesn't necessarily mean age, but just in terms of ideas, is going to be incredibly important. Tulsi Gabbard, a good friend, a colleague, a classmate of mine, recently announced.
She announced yesterday that she's going to formally announce, I think, this week.
That's right. So she's a phenomenal member of Congress, and I think will surprise many once the American people get to know her. And we'll see what happens moving forward, but it's going to have to be a campaign on issues. We can't allow Donald Trump to drag our candidates into the mud, because I think he realizes that the only way for him to win is to basically concede, I'm bad, but try to make the Democratic candidate even worse. I don't think he'll be able to successfully do that now that the American people have experienced the long national nightmare that is Donald Trump as president. But if we can keep the focus on issues, House Democrats, we're fighting the lower health care costs, pay for everyday Americans, put forth the real infrastructure plan, protect people with pre-existing conditions. That's the issue that helped us win control of the House of Representatives, clean up corruption in Washington. Then I think we'll continue to be successful as Democrats in the House majority, and ultimately our presidential candidate will be successful.
All right, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, we'll see you next week in National Action Network for Martin Luther King holiday.